In my previous video, I showed you 3 tricks to make better panels. So today, join me at the bench and I use those 2 panels to make 2 floating shelves. How's it? My name is Dylan and this is Ply Creations. Today we are doing another build video. I've watched some videos on the internet and I've seen guys use the Festool Domino to mount floating shelves onto a wall. In most, if not all of those cases, the shelves were straight. So today we are going to do another slant on that design, and that is to make shelves that need to go into a corner. I've got the design in my head. The measurements are slightly vague. So sit back, relax, join me at the bench and watch me figure this one out. I did mention that the measurements were slightly vague, and it's really little more than following my wife to where she wanted the shelves mounted, sticking a measuring tape into the corner and taking that depth measurement, which is roughly about 350 millimeters or just shy of 14 inches. Sorry, just checking my notes to make sure I've got the inches correct. Just shy of 14 inches deep. I then took that measurement to a CAD program, did a simple sketch, and from there I got the nominal dimensions of what the shelf would look like material wise. The most important measurement from there is the front of the shelf, and it comes to around about 700 millimeters or around about 27.5 inches if I'm not mistaken. And that will be the front edge of the rectangle I need to cut out. Now, it's really simple to lay out. All you do is you measure or mark the ends of the front parts of the shelf, then bring a rule and something like a combination square that will give you a 45-degree angle to that mark, and using a long rule to extend the line to what will be the back corner. Doing the same on the other side. And of course, where those 2 lines meet is 90 degrees and will be the back of corner of the shelf. Stock thickness wise, it's just over an inch or 25 millimeters. I am using stock from a previous or leftover from a previous customer project. That's what I have on hand. So we'll wing it and see how that pans out. I have tried to cut the triangle using on the table saw using my crosscut sled or my miter gauge, and because of the capacity or the size of the rectangle of the shelf, I cannot make a safe cut. So that resulted in me having to modify my tapering and my jointing jig to be able to clamp the sheet down or the panel down to it to make a safe cut. So once I've done that, next step is to do the layout for the frame and start building the frame that will go against the wall. Then we'll take the dominoes and the shelf will then slot into. So as soon as I've cut the triangles out, I'll see you at the bench so we can do the layouts, and I'll show you my thoughts around the rest of the design. Now we have 2 surprisingly accurate triangles cut out of the panels. I did warn you that we might need to figure out a couple of things as we go along, and the first one came earlier than expected. What happened when I cut through on the first triangle is the waste was so heavy that as I was finishing the cut, the waste just dropped down, and I'm showing you an image of how bad that corner had torn out. At least it makes the decision about what surface on that shelf is going to be pointing towards the bottom a lot easier. I'm showing you a video that I've been debating, or a video section of this build that I've been debating to actually if I should or shouldn't show it to you, but I've decided to do so. The way I got around this problem is to put a support onto the top of my table saw and to support the waste so that it doesn't just drop down and tear out. But it may not be immediately obvious, but it was really, really dangerous for me to do it this way. I attached the support to the top of the table saw, and it's the same thickness as my sled, the plywood, but I attached it to the top using plywood, so not plywood, sorry, a double-sided tape. So that wasn't going to go anywhere during the cutting process, and that's the point. However, the weight of the waste was distributed such that it just so happened to fall down on the right side, or the correct side, of my support. If I had any more weight inboard between the support and the blade, the waste would have gone between the blade and the support, and it would have spoiled my day. So it was a dangerous cut to do, and I got away with it this time around. There's a couple of ways you can still use that method, but do it in a safer manner. One is bring your support closer to the blade, where you make sure that the weight of your waste is going to fall on the right side of your support, or have a support that's wide enough to support all of the weight of your waste. So lesson learned, be careful, and again, proof that even if you've been doing it for some time, you always need to be attentive of what you're doing and the decisions you make in the workshop. The more, shall we say, the more serious figuring out part of this particular design and project came while I was having a coffee break, and I decided to just check the domino and make sure everything fits correctly and I'll be able to cut the joinery. And I realized why I haven't been seeing any videos where anybody is making corner shelves using a domino to make a floating version, and that is because it won't work. I'm showing you, I'm going to take you to the bench and I'm going to show you what my design idea was and why it doesn't work or wouldn't work. So here's the other triangle of the shelf, and the idea was to cut out a frame from the shelf itself and then assemble a frame, and that will then be attached to the wall. In the frame and in the shelf, I wanted to cut the mortises for the dominoes, and those mortises need to be at 45 degrees to the edge of both the shelf as well as the frame. And I'm showing you a domino as an example. It would have gone on edge, but that's simply what I was hoping to achieve. I would then glue the domino into the frame and simply just slot the shelf into the frame, like the guys have done it using a straight shelf. The problem is, and I'm showing you another video, when you set the fence, the reference fence for the domino to 45 degrees, and you bring the fence that should be butting up to your workpiece for the cutter, there's quite a significant gap, and that's not going to work because you now have an angle between the two surfaces and it's not flush to the face that you want to cut the joinery into. So my wife isn't getting floating shelves. Luckily, the brief wasn't for floating shelves. That was my idea. But I'll be pivoting now into changing the whole project in putting a railing at the bottom of the shelf that I will then attach to the wall. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to install dominoes into the railing and cut matching mortises into the shelf that this will then, or the shelf will then slip onto. So I'm going to process some lumber, cut, measure the railings, bring you back to the bench and show you what I have and what the next step will be. So I've processed some wood, and I've now got 4 railings that will support the shelves. I've got them roughly about 15 millimeters thick. That allows me to use the 5mm thick dominoes, and I've got them 400 millimeters long, and that will support most of the edge on the shelf. I'm going to be laying out for the dominoes now. So I'm showing you on the bench on the other camera. I've measured 30 millimeters from the corner in on the edge, and I've done that on both sides. And I'm now going to mark out for the dominoes. I'm using 3 dominoes, so I'll use 2. Each one of them will be 30 mils in from the ends of the railing, and then between the two I'll then go to the middle and install a third one. It's really important when you do the layouts that you reference the same edge on both the shelf and the railing that is going to go against the wall, and that will ensure that the joinery sits at the same depth away from each edge. Also very, very important, as you'll notice that I'm marking relatively roughly from the shelf to the railing. I'm going to be using the narrow mortise, so that's the mortise size that is the same or very close to the same as the width of the domino in the railing, and I'm going to be gluing the domino in there. But in the shelf I'm going to use the wider mortise. That's going to allow me a level of movement back and forth. So I've marked out my 30 mil first. From there I mark 400 millimeters. That's going to be the length of my railing, and then 30 mils in from that end, and then the same on this side. I'm going to measure the distance between the two, which is 34, so that's going to give us 17 or 170 millimeters between the two. Just make sure my marks are hitting the edge. That improves the accuracy slightly. Now I'm going to bring, I've already decided what orientation my railings are going to be in. I bring the railing on and I match the ends of the railing with the marks I've made, and just carry that line across onto the railing. Now remember, it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, because the mortises differences, well, size differences, is going to allow me to get everything to fit together. So I'm going to be marking out all four edges on the shelves and then proceed to cut out the dominoes, and I'll bring you back once I've cut the dominoes and show you what it looks like when everything comes together, and then we can actually start with the finishing for this project today. So I've cut the domino joinery, I've test fitted the dominoes, and everything looks good. Interesting day in the workshop, and it's not about to end. I've got two mistakes that I've picked up that I need to fix before we can start with the finishing process. The first is, you may recall that I said that you need to use the same reference surface for the rail as well as the shelf, so that they sit flush together against the wall. On this one, the railing sits a little bit proud, very little, I can barely feel it, but it pushes the shelf away from the wall so it doesn't sit nice and neatly against the wall itself. It's going to be a quick fix, just clamp them together and a few swipes with the hand plane should sort it out. The second thing is, well, the second problem that I need to fix is, when I built the panels or made the panels for the shelves, one panel came out a little bit narrower than the other one, and as a result the one shelf is not as deep as the other one, and I'd like to get them at least similar depth. So the one that is dimensionally a little bit deeper, I'll take that back to the sled, clamp that up and push it through the table. So I can do that with a hand plane as well, but it's 10 millimeters and I'd prefer to do that on the table saw. If you are wondering who this is for, I did mention it's for my wife, and I'm working on a series that I'm calling my internal customer projects. My wife is my internal customer, and she's got a list of items that she'd like me to do, and this is the second one in the series. The first one is I turned a pot for her, and I'll leave the link in the description as well as on the screen. Go and have a look there. But this will be an ongoing series of internal customer projects where I also want to use certain techniques and show you how I go about to process these. So I need to fix these two, and then it's really just the final steps of rounding edges and getting everything smooth. So as I narrate the final section in this video, you'll see me finish off the rails as well as the shelves. from using my favorite or all-time favorite tool in my workshop, my block plane, to roll around over the edges. I'm leaving a video link in the description as well as on the screen to my very first video where I fixed the block plane. So go and check that out. But using from the block plane, using my hand plane to get the final finish on my railings. I prefer using hand planes, smoothing planes to get my final finish, to using my favorite sander. And I did a review on that sander, and I'm also leaving the link in the description and on the video for you to go and check that out. The reason for using the sander in this case is I didn't pay all that much attention when I laminated the panels together, and I didn't pay attention in regards to grain direction. So using a hand plane a little bit tricky, so the sander is a better option in this case. And finally, applying the finish. And here I use a product from a company called Pro Nature. They're based in Cape Town here in South Africa. I'm leaving a link in the description as well as a discount code that you can use on your first purchase. Go and check them out. Their products are environmentally safe and green, really solid company, and they produce a solid product. So check them out. If you are living in the Southern African region, they are a local company. If you are not based in my neck of the woods, the closest approximation would be Rubio Monocoat or Osmo. If you're familiar with those products, this one is very similar, but solid product, easy to use and hard wearing. I love Pro Nature's products. All that's left to do now is glue in the dominoes into the railings and drill the holes for the hardware to mount the shelves, and of course waiting for my wife to indicate where the shelves should go. And that would be the end of internal customer project number 2 here on my channel. Leaving a link in the description, lots of links today, to a companion article as well as a 12-step checklist you can download and keep at your bench on how I do my laminations. Maybe that will help you out if you struggle with your own. Go and check out those links. As a review for today, 3 things I've learned. 1 is pay attention when you are using your power tools in a manner that is not necessarily routine. Think about what you're doing. I really risked quite a bit today without necessarily realizing. Make yourself a cup of coffee, think about what you're about to do, and reconsider and change if you have to. Very important. Second, there's things go wrong in the workshop, and today was a tricky one. Things don't always work out the way you've envisioned in your head. So while you're having that cup of coffee, considering your personal safety, and you're struggling with your project, maybe consider how you can finish the project still to end up with a result, but different ways you can do it, and then change as is necessary. Most of the time, it's just a slight change, and you still end up with a result, shall we say. And then lastly, I should have modified my sled a long time ago, and that's the tapering sled. I've now added railing at the bottom of it that runs inside of the mitre slot on my table saw. I used to run it against the fence, and it's now got more capacity, and it's opened up a whole slew of new possibilities on that particular jig. So I should have done that a long time ago. But at the end of this video, I'd like to remind you, be safe in your own workshop. Today is especially a reminder of that. And as always, thank you for joining me in my workshop. I hope you have a good one. And until I see you next time, cheers.